Hello, friend. Welcome to the Happy Family Club. We're delighted to have you join us. Our mission is to help you have a happier, stronger family. We do that by bringing you the world's greatest experts in family, marriage, parenting, and relationships. We interview them to discover their secrets, their strategies, their techniques, and bring them to you so that you can cherry pick exactly what you need right now to have more success and more joy in your family.
And if you enjoyed this interview, we encourage you to share it with your friends and your family and come on to the happyfamilyclub.com and see if you can find more information that's going to help you and your family be happier.
Again, thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the interview. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Happy Family Club podcast. We're so excited to have you here today. And, our special guest, Barb Winters, is here with us. And I was just saying to her how much I love her name. There's so many great joy and emotion and connection I have. I have an Aunt Barb who literally was a surrogate mother for me. And just so anyway, there's a lot of reasons why we're excited to have you here, but one of them is your amazing name. So we're excited to have you. Yeah. And I thought Margie could do a quick introduction for you. If we get anything wrong, correct us.
Okay.
And then we'll dive right in. So
yeah, Barb Winters, we're so grateful that you're here with us today. She is an amazing person as I've come to get to know you a bit. She's written this book called Sexpectations, Helping the Next Generation Navigate Healthy Relationships, which is a topic that is so needed today. It's amazing. But she's also a certified sexual risk avoidance specialist. Did I say that right?
Yes, ma'am.
There you go, which is also very needful. Certified mental health coach. She's done a bunch of research on pornography and its effects on individuals and our society, basically. And so she speaks a lot at churches, schools, just a lot of coaching. It's just to help people with behaviors that can be risky for them in the future and help them make healthy choices, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So, and you're in Florida, right?
Florida.
Yes, Central Florida. Yep.
Yeah, and
4 children, adult children, right?
Yes, 4 adult grown
awesome.
children. We're empty nesting at the moment.
At the moment, and I see some family pictures behind you. Such a beautiful family. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Very sweet.
We like them.
Yeah. And your husband is a pastor, right?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
I love where I saw that you like to take long romantic walks with your pastor
on the beach.
Yeah, we enjoy that together. But yeah, the big joke is, well, it's also my husband. So.
Yeah, exactly. Love it. So
well, and that you do counseling with parents of children with addictions and sexual addictions and pornography and things. I think that's amazing because so many parents are embarrassed by that and try to hide it and feel like they're alone and don't have a lot of support. So thank you for that amazing work that you're doing. It's great. Thanks for joining us, Barb.
Yeah, I'm loving being here. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So I want to get to our key question because I know you've got a lot to add because families, there's so much in our world now surrounding relationships and sexuality and the intimacy that exists between two human beings and so much messed up stuff. So I'm really excited to get around that to help you. Well, you can talk about whatever you want. So I don't want to lead the what do they call that? Lead the witness. I don't want to do that. But I want to hear a little bit about how you got here. I mean, it's a very unusual thing. Most people they're either brazen about this topic or they're so embarrassed about it, they just never gets brought up. And having someone who talks about it in a healthy way is so unique. So tell us your background? How did you get here?
Sure, absolutely. I love to tell my story. And just a little caveat, because even yesterday, somebody's like, I can't believe you're telling this story. My son knows all my stories. So we have his permission to talk about him and his stuff, but it really started right after we moved to Florida years ago now. But we had brought our son and our daughter, our youngest 2, with us right after we moved to Florida. Our older 2 were already out of the house at the time. And my husband and I were taking a walk just kind of enjoying these new Florida surroundings, the sunshine and where we moved and all the fun things, kind of enjoying our day together. And as we rounded the corner to cross a busy street to get to our house, we could see our son standing in the yard and he was in hysterics. He
Wow.
was motioning to us and jumping up and down and wondering where we were and trying to get it, our attention. And both my husband and I were standing there, as the traffic was kind of in our way, going, "Oh my gosh, what could possibly be going on over there?" Is our daughter lying in a pool of blood? Has someone broken into the house? What could possibly be this distressing? And when the traffic finally broke and we were able to reach him, he was kind of wailing and I could barely understand what he was saying. I heard words like watching porn, warning, police coming, and it's kind of weird. I remember that, I'm standing in this beautiful Florida environment. The grass is green and there's flowers blooming, and, it's a normal day with cars going by. And yet, the trajectory of my mom life changed right then and there. It was
Yeah.
a very pivotal moment of my life because we had no idea, literally no idea that this could possibly be happening under our roof in our house. We'd had the sex talk with our kiddos. Like you mentioned, my husband's a pastor. I was homeschooling my kids.
Mm.
And we just really thought there was no way this could possibly go on in our world. And I remember I had like a gag reflex in the back of my throat. I thought I was going to throw up. And then all the feels, shock first, and then anger and hurt and shame. Like you mentioned, I was like, this is awful. But mostly loneliness, because who are you going to tell? Who
Right.
was I going to turn to and say, "Hey, my son's watching porn. How about yours?" I mean,
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna say those words out loud to anyone. I never thought that I would disclose this to anyone. And we helped him and we put some practical things into place to try and help him. But what we didn't know is he quickly got back into his habit, and later he confessed again. This time the confession was deep felt, it was wholehearted. He really wanted out of the addiction that he had found himself in, and
Yeah.
we were able to really help him a little more. But through all that, I was a mess. I'm like the mom on the floor falling apart. What did I do? I've broken my child. This was all my fault. Guilt ridden, everything. And I didn't know how to view my son anymore. I'm like, who is this kid? I thought you were one thing, but you're really this other thing. And I was a mess and I could not find help for myself. So
Mm.
I could find help for other people, for him, I mean. I could find help, like people were telling me, do this for him, do this for him, do this for him. And I'm like, okay, I can do all that. But what about me? Because I'm the one who really needs help here also. And so at some point, through all this, it was years that we were kind of in this situation. I just heard God saying, well, you start talking about it. You need to be that person that you needed for you. And
Yeah.
so that's what I did. I started Hopeful Mom at hopefulmom.net, and I sort of hung my hat, if you will, like, if you have a child that's watching pornography, then I can be a sounding board. I can be someone who, I like to say, I give virtual hugs, because
Yeah.
that's really what parents need at first. They really need to know, I'm not alone. I'm going to be okay. My child's going to be okay. And so that, I just wrap my arms around them and say, it's going to be all right. This does not define you. This does not define them. We're going to get through this. And then after a while, sort of morphed. It got a little bigger. I do a lot of online safety stuff. I now work for a nonprofit as a sexual risk avoidance specialist, like you were saying. And then I wrote a book. And the book really is about helping our kids understand what healthy relationships look like,
Yeah.
especially in this sexualized culture that they
Mhm.
live in.
That's an incredible background. It really is
What a
amazing.
story.
And the thing that stood out to me there is that you kind of mentioned it passingly, but that it's this, it was this years long process, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could speak just we'll get into some other stuff in a minute, but I'd love to hear you speak just a little bit to that concept of enduring through some of those things and being able to manage yourself and your life and your child, and having the patience to not give up,
Yeah.
and also not to I don't know what the right word is, but it's like, how do you love yourself and your child through that many years of experience, right? So
Yeah.
can you speak to some of that just really quick?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I mean, parenting is a ridiculously hard job. And I think
Yep.
that, we need to acknowledge that a little bit more, right? Parents need a lot more pats on the back, because if you stick with it, then it's a big deal, right? So I think part of it was just leaning into, this is a long endeavor.
Yeah.
This isn't there is no quick fix.
Right.
Reminding myself daily what the end goal is,
Yeah.
right? Because we have a reason for parenting, and we should, if we don't, we should, right? We should be thinking farther in to the future. So my end goal is to have mature, healthy adults who contribute more to the society than they take.
Right.
So that was my end goal, and when I had that in mind, it's a little easier to get up every day. And
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter what the issue is, right? Whether your kid knocks over milk onto a table, or scratches the door, or sneaks out of the house, whatever it is they're doing, when we have that perspective of, okay, the end goal is to have that mature, healthy adult.
Yeah.
We're not raising kids, we're raising adults.
Yeah.
Then we can stick in it farther for the long haul. Now, personally, one of the transformations that I went through was how to view my child. And I kind of touched on it in my story a little bit, but it was really difficult because I knew my son to be this funny, loving, personable kid who asked a bunch of questions and was constantly talking, very
Mhm.
interactive, very loving, all about legal stuff. Like, he'd constantly ask, "Was that legal?" or "What about this?" and would dive into theological questions. So this was the kid I thought I knew. And then I found out this secret kid.
Yeah.
So I had a really hard time melding these two together. Who
Mm,
is he? Is
mm.
he this kid that I've always known, or is he this kid? And so I really struggled, because I learned growing up that a person who went into the back end of the video store and looked at those videos,
Oh,
that
yeah.
they were kind of monsters. They were like the riffraff of society. And so now I'm like, is that my child? Is
Yeah.
he the riffraff of society? Is he a monster? And so I think at some point, God really helped me understand that. Well, it was through research, really, because when I started researching the pornography industry and what they're doing and how they prey on our children, they're predators. They prey
Oh, yeah.
on children. I was like, wait a minute. I have the wrong view. My son is not a monster. He's a victim.
Yeah.
And he's a victim of this porn industry, and a victim of the society that is either pretending like it doesn't exist or celebrating it.
Yeah.
And so I need to change how I see him. And that was really a pivotal point in my recovery also, but in our relationship too, because when you can start to see your child for who he really is, not all good, not all bad, right? Because we're three-dimensional. We're not these flat people. Then we can start interacting in a little bit of a better way. We can be a little more relaxed. We can be okay when they have faults and mistakes, and they're trying to muddle through life too, just like we are. They haven't got it all figured it out any more than we do, really. But eventually God said, not only is he a victim, but he's a potential victor.
Yeah.
So it was really cool. And my husband helped me see that, because he's pastor, so we'll
Yeah.
give him that credit. So that monster to victim to potential victor was really instrumental in helping me stick through it in the long haul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's such
powerful.
great advice and
And
information.
it's very interesting to me. And, most of the people listening to this will be, people of strong faith, or at least wanting to be, hoping to see themselves as people of strong faith in God and in Christ. And it's always fascinating to me. And I'm guilty as charged about what I'm about to say, but it's like, we want ourselves and our children to be perfect, and then we forget, like, well, wait a minute. If we're all perfect and we're embarrassed when we're not perfect, like, why did God even do what he did? Right?
True story.
Like,
Yeah.
oh no, hold
Yeah.
on. He knew we were going to be human. He knew we were going to make mistakes. He knew we were going to have problems. And the other thing that I want everyone to listen to is we are going to center a lot of our conversation on these addictions and healthy human relationships and all these kinds of things today. But the truth is, I think that what we're talking about here is a way to understand and better connect with our children, regardless of what that infirmity or weakness or human element that, you talked about those three-dimensional thing. Well, the right, the wrong, and then that third element is like, well, that third element can be all kinds of stuff. And like you said, from lying to cheating to sneaking out at night to, whatever. By the way, you're describing my childhood, but I won't get into that. So,
Mine too.
you know so so accepting that, wow, we're not perfect and our children aren't perfect, and that's why God does what he does, and that's why we're here as parents. Wow, that just is like, oh, it takes all this pressure off, and now let's just figure out how to do this. And that's where you come in and are so powerful, Barb, is you're
Yeah.
helping us once we get to that spot, say, well, even helping us get to that spot and saying, okay, so what do we do?
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. And I think that seeing it as a long journey and seeing that end goal of helping our children really become solid adults that are contributing and God fearing and just wonderful and serving other people more than they are served. It's such a beautiful concept. It really is cool.
And that they can become the victor. They can
I know, right?
overcome this
Yeah.
and conquer it. Is amazing.
Absolutely.
So powerful.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that background. I didn't mean to get us off on a tangent, but it really wasn't a tangent. It was really well done. So
Yeah.
beautiful. So all right. So if we throw our the question we love to ask at you, what's one thing that we can do as parents or we can do as families to create more joy and happiness in the family? Where would you go with that question?
It's a great question, and I really pondered it for a minute. And I had like all these notes. I'm like, what's my tagline? What's this going to be? But I came back to the tagline of my book, and that is distorted views of intimate relationships abound. Let's offer youth a better option. And when
Mm,
we talk about healthy relationships, that's what we're doing, right? We're trying to offer our kids a better option because they get all this information just thrown at them through social media, from their peers, just society, etc. And we need to be available and let them know there's a better way. There
yeah.
really is.
So I think what I hear you saying is that um, the actual core environment. We were talking about this the other day. We were looking at divorce rates from like the early late 1700s and 1800s, and it was about 5 to 6%, right?
Wow.
So shocking, right? And now today we're pushing 50+%. And
Mhm.
I we're having this conversation with our children. I said, what are some, it would be interesting to look at what are some like key things that shifted in our world to contribute to that breakdown of families and of marriages. And one of the things that I think, I mean, I don't know everything, but one of the things I think is that this concept that you've hit so ideally is this healthy relationships. I think we just don't know. And our culture is saturated with dysfunctional relationship qualities, right?
Yes.
And so maybe you could dive a little deeper into that. And I don't know how you normally quantify it. Again, I wish I'd read your book before we started this, but um, I wonder, because we look at healthy relationships, and of course, we have relationships with ourselves, with our parents, as we get into being an adult, with relationships with loved ones, romantic relationships. So, where would you say is like a real critical fulcrum point? Let's just imagine for a moment we've got smaller children, tweens coming into their teen years, which is really where stuff starts to go haywire for a lot of parents, right? So, what would you say is our key relationships in that age, and then maybe we can look at some of the other categories of people.
Sure, sure. Well, I think one of the things that we need to do as parents is to actually understand the culture that they live in.
Okay, great.
So, and I mean, until my son had this issue, I didn't get it. I had no idea.
Yeah,
I didn't know all the things connected to the internet and that all the things were getting could have all this stuff come into the house. I had no idea. And so I think that's part of it. And and then not judge, right? Because I think a lot of times and it happens every generation. We do.
Yeah.
You know, the generation above me, oh, these kids these days. Um, you know,
Right.
and now
Yep.
they still, now we're saying it about the next generation, right? And so just not judging, not criticizing, not making snide remarks, instead really immerse ourselves in what does their life look like?
Hmm.
Because I think until we do that, we can't really understand them, and then we can't affect them. We can't have an effect on who they are and what they're doing and the choices that they're making, because they're going to just fluff us off like we don't know what we're talking about. And to some degree we may not.
You
You know,
know,
they don't understand that we've lived this life. Like we had the same troubles you do. It wasn't in the same context that you have it in, right? We didn't have smartphones, but we did have hormones. It's like we did go through some of this, kind of like when you said you're describing my childhood, and I'm like mine too,
yeah.
right? I did all the things, and but understanding where they're coming from, right? So that we can come alongside them then and empathize with them, and then talk with them in love, right? Because they have the hookup culture, and they have pornography being thrown at them. They're sending nudes, and they think that's normal. And
Yeah.
if somebody asks for a nude and they're a middle schooler, that's just normal. Oh, okay, that person likes me, I'm gonna send it. Or they might choose not to for a minute or two, but then they have the peer pressure, right? Of
Pressure.
asking, 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 and finally caving because, well, he says he loves me. And it's guys and girls both. They're
Right.
sending back and forth. They've got predators trying to groom them for human trafficking through their DMs while they're on their video games, or while they're scrolling through their social media. There's sextortion. I mean, it's a lot.
It's a
It's
lot.
a lot. And when you start to dive into what they're really dealing with, I think it helps us be a little bit more understanding and a little bit more empathetic. So that's where I start. And I don't know if I answered your question or not,
Yeah.
that's kind of one of the things that I think is very key. That's like the base, if you will, of trying to affect your preteens and your teens and their relationship. And then we can start, okay, I hear you, I understand what you're saying. Now let's look at what healthy relationships look like.
Yeah. Very cool. So, and I think that it's amazing. I mentioned, of course, we have a lot of children, and so we hear a lot of stuff. And then also, I've had a chance to sit down and counsel with just hundreds of teens, and it's amazing. It's almost unfathomable the degree of pressure that they're getting from peers and from society to engage in unhealthy, relationships and
Yeah.
sexuality. It's really
Yeah.
crazy. Like you were saying, between the pictures and the chats and the DMs, etc. It's really quite remarkable. So there's a cool scripture in Isaiah that talks about it's a prophecy of Christ, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says that he'll be fed butter and honey, that he
Mhm.
can know the good and eschew the evil.
Oh, I
Right?
like that. Yep.
So powerful. And I thought of that when I saw the title of your book. It's like, we're going to teach them the healthy. We're going to show them the healthy stuff. So, can you give us an idea what do those healthy relationships look like, and maybe follow that up with how do we effectively communicate that or teach that to or model that? However, I don't know what you suggest about how do we pass that on to our children, because like you said, a lot of times they just fluff us off and and roll their eyes and
Yeah.
move on, right? So
Yeah.
um, I think that understanding what the relationship is and then how to transfer that would be really powerful for people.
Right. Well, and I think modeling is really the key, right?
Yeah,
So we have to understand it ourselves. And that is a big issue to begin with, because a lot of us didn't grow up in a home where it was modeled properly, or we
right,
didn't grow up in a church that modeled it properly.
right.
And the church is ever evolving in the sense of we're learning as we go. The
Right.
church didn't talk about sex and sexuality and pornography and all these issues years ago. They're barely talking about it now, if at all.
Yeah.
So first we have to come to the point where we're understanding what a healthy relationship is. And so, yeah, the middle part of the book's expectations is all about the habits of healthy relationships.
Mm.
And I use the backdrop of First Corinthians 13, right, the love chapter, to try and help understand what do these look like. And there's more than what I say, but I talked about four. So love, in the love chapter, I refer to First John 4:14. We love because he first loved us. Well, we have to accept that love. But
Yes.
we have to understand who he is and his love for us in order to be able to then give it out. We need to receive it before we can pass it along. And then selflessness.
But can I
So,
touch on that receiving thing? 'Cause
sure.
it's a really, really thing to me. Big thing. I wonder if you have seen best practices in helping children um, develop the ability to accept love, because
Mm,
I see, again, the society we live in is such a, you see everything on social media that's perfect. Yeah, it's like everybody's, best or whatever. And then and then the comparison game, and it just
yeah.
destroys children's esteem and their self concept,
Mhm.
and makes it really hard for them. So, what do you, just again, I want to get to number two, three, and four, but that receiving love is such a vital thing. How do we get our children to do that?
Well, that's a great question. We can't really change them, right? We can't
Oh
tell
yeah,
them what to do or how to do it. I think it's just all about the modeling
yeah,
and making sure that as they go through, it's the little things I think we do, right?
yes,
And I mean, as you're talking, one of the things I remember is one of my kids years and years ago. I was homeschooling them, and they were doing so well in their spelling, and for the first time, they missed a word, and they just fell apart. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, what do I do?"
right,
But I kind of told him, I just kind of wrapped my arms around him, and I was like, the whole point of this is for you to get to the place where you're not, where we know you need help, where
yeah,
you know that you need some learning.
right.
If you spelled all the words correctly, then would there be no reason us having spelling
Yeah,
today or ever? So just kind of coming alongside them in those moments and helping them to see this is a good thing
yeah,
where you need some help, and that's where you need to lean on me, and ultimately we want them to eventually lean on
um,
God,
mhm,
but and I'm here for you,
yeah,
right? So when we model that, I'm not going anywhere, I'm going to love you in your faults and on the days that you don't spell words correctly, then hopefully they will see as they go that when other people do that to them,
yeah,
that they can come back to that core, that
well,
foundation where
yeah.
they know the love and acceptance and belonging actually exists.
Well, and you know what you're teaching them there? I mean, I love this. It's like an epiphany for me. It's like you're teaching them, like, you do not have to be perfect to be loved,
Yes.
right? In
Yes.
fact, I love you all the more because you're not perfect, and we're
Yes.
together, learning together, and it's totally cool, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
oh, beautiful. Okay, sorry. So that's love. Number two, where do we go from here?
So the second one is selflessness.
Mm,
And so, I mean, there's nothing that teaches selflessness anymore, I think, than parenting. We, I mean, seriously, it is just, again, the hardest job, but also the most rewarding job. And we have got to just let go of who we are and have that selflessness. And kind of back to what we were talking about a minute ago, but we agape love our children, which is the highest form of love, right? That selfless, unconditional love, by finding out what their needs are and then trying to meet those. So
yeah,
the belonging and the acceptance and the safety and the validation and feeling valued. I mean, we talk about needs more, like food and shelter. Those are definite needs,
yeah,
but we all have that place in our heart, in our emotional well-being, where we need all of these, literally need all of these other things. So belonging, acceptance, safety, unconditional love. And I thought of a story when you were talking about before. One of the things we did when our son that first conversation on the yard. It took a while. But at the end of that conversation, I literally sat next to him and I put my arm around him and I said, I do want you to know that we love you
Yeah.
unconditionally, that this does not change our love for you.
Yeah.
And we are going to change some things in our household. We're going to change some parameters. We're going to change some guidelines. We're going to put some protections in place. But it's because we love you. We're
Yeah.
not mad at you. We're not going to punish you, but we are going to change some things. And
Right.
so I think just voicing that regularly is so important. Our kids need to know that they're loved.
Yeah. So true. The image that I keep having coming to my mind is, as we've taught our children how to ride bikes,
Mhm.
it's a guarantee when you put that child on the bike for the first, their first major solo trip and you send them off, it's like a 99.9% guarantee they're going to fall and scrape a knee or something, right?
Yep.
And never once have we run over to him and been like, "You dumb kid, I can't believe you fell off your bike. What's wrong with you?" Right? It's just like, "Oh, you fell down, you scoop them up, you love them, you give them a band-aid if you need to, and you're like, okay, let's keep going. Let's try it again." And I get that sense from you of like, yeah, this, pornography and it's deviant sexual behavior and stuff, it is an issue, and they're living in a world that heavily promotes that,
Yeah.
and they're going to fall down and bang up their knees sometimes. And so we get to love them. I love what you did. Put your arm around your son, like, we will change some stuff, and we love you. I guess you
Yes.
said it in the order. We love you and we'll change some. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So
I
that's
can't brag on always getting that right, but that
nope.
That's the goal, right?
that's the goal, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I have definitely freaked out about scraped knees,
Yes.
so, oh well. But shockingly, I'm also human, even though I'm an adult. I don't know.
Imagine.
I know.
I'm sure your wife can attest to that more than you
Oh,
can.
yeah, she can. Oh, boy. She, on the other hand, is like Mary Poppins, practically perfect in every way, so it's
Oh,
beautiful.
That's so sweet.
So, love and selflessness.
Yes, mutuality is the next one. So that one's rough, right? Especially in the church, because it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah,
Who's the head of the household? What does this submission thing look like? So I went for years trying to figure this out. And our kids are receiving messages through online venues that sexual encounters are mutual. That's what they think. That's what the society is telling them, that both parties are agreeing to what's happening on the screens, but they're receiving a wrong message. Pornography promotes physical and sexual assault. It promotes women as commodities. It promotes racism. Online gaming promotes violence and portraying women as sex objects. So this is where they're coming from. But mutuality really means that both parties support each other and each person's goals and dreams and aspirations. They're each other's cheerleader. And I love that about my marriage because we've both had times where one of us has been trying to really go for something, and we're behind each other 100%. We're supporting them. And I've really seen that from my husband recently because for years it was me staying at home with my kids, homeschooling, and he was a pastor. He was making the money. He was doing all the things necessary to keep our family together. But as I've stepped out and done some things, he's really rallied behind me and become
Oh,
my biggest cheerleader. I know I could just
awesome.
cry thinking about it. So,
Yeah,
but that's what we need, and we also need that mutual respect and accountability. We need to be all each other's accountability partners, and so that helping our kids understand all these things in a healthy relationship. So yeah, and the last one in the book is communication, and we've touched on that a little bit as throughout the whole conversation we've been having here. But really deciding that we are going to work on that communication with our children. And that really means for us as parents to pay attention.
yeah,
And sometimes we need to also get our heads out of the phone in order to look up and look at our children in the eye and listen to what they have to say, even if they're I don't know about you, but I've had some kids that could tell a story in 10 minutes that could have maybe taken one. And so
30 seconds.
to be able to look and really give them your attention and
Yeah.
continue nodding and because that's so important that they know that we are interested in who they are at the core of their being. We want to know who they are, and so modeling that and being aware of our body language and paying attention to our tone and our inflection, because they can read all that.
Sure.
They
Oh, yeah.
know when we're really frustrated even though our words are saying something different.
They,
So, thinking
they
about
just
that.
feel it. Can we go back to neutrality just really quick?
Sure.
And then I want to talk, and I have a question about communication. So, that mutuality and talking about having, both parties supporting each other and having the best interest in mind for each other. Um, that's such an interesting, I mean, it's an offshoot from selflessness, but we do live in a selfish environment. And also, I think that you said, they make assumptions that when they're online, there's this, mutual agreement that it's okay. And I just wondered if you've seen best practices in helping youth, especially, kind of get out of themselves and realize that, actually, if they're looking at porn or they're, engaging in some of these activities, and it's not only hurting, it's hurting both parties substantially. And I just wonder
Yeah,
how to help them come to that sort of awareness level.
sure. Well, in the classroom, we talk about the brain science and
Yeah.
uh, how the brain works. And so the fight between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, which is the instinctual part, the pleasure seeking part
Yeah.
versus the reasoning part. And so sometimes we help them understand that when they're in a struggle, they're in a clash, they're under construction. That prefrontal cortex hasn't quite developed yet. And so helping them understand that when you get caught up in these types of behaviors, you're actually forming grooves in your path that, as you become an adult, are going to be detrimental to you.
Wow.
And so,
Yeah.
helping them understand, like, I need to resist this temptation, I need to turn away from this in
Mhm.
order to help develop my prefrontal cortex. Now, that trying to reason with students isn't always doesn't always work, but when we also talk about bonding with the screen, and so understanding that when we are made to connect as
Yes.
humans, and so when we bond with screens, then it's difficult to then turn around and bond with a real life person.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that when we talk about that they understand that this actually is going to hinder me in a real life relationship, if not now, someday. Just really wanting them to understand that connection and how they're hurting themselves and their future selves. And that was one of the things actually that was instrumental, I believe, in my son's uh, healing, is
Yeah.
that he figured out that, what, this is going to hurt me into the future.
Yeah.
So helping them understand that those people in the videos that you're watching, they don't actually want to be there.
Yeah.
Most of them have been coerced, tricked, trafficked, whatever, to
Whatever.
get
Yeah.
to that point. And they're in a state of the drug induced state. And
Yeah.
so, or they thought it was their last resort. I mean, most people don't wake up one day and think, well, I want to be a porn star.
Totally.
So helping them understand we are hurting ourselves, but we're hurting other people too by contributing to it, right?
Yeah.
Pornography fuels sex trafficking. And
Yeah.
when we understand that, hopefully they'll say no. I do remember one day, it was several years ago, that I was saying that in the classroom, and one of the guy's eyes got really big, and he was like, What are you saying? And I could tell that there was just like some clicking going on. And
Mhm.
I just was hoping that this was really sinking in. Like the
Yeah.
next time you go to click, that you're thinking, wait a minute, I'm actually contributing to
Hurting.
this criminal industry. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Mm.
Wow. That's powerful. And those are really hard things to talk about, but that is the reality of our world.
Yeah.
A number of years ago, it's probably been maybe close to 10 years ago now. I had opportunity to I was doing some consulting with a gal who ran a very successful business, and we got talking about her backstory. And she, at 16 years old, had run away from home, was homeless, out on the streets, got a little bit into drugs, but then had no way to make money, and so entered the prostitution world, right? And talked about what happened to her and what she was treated like, and subsequent, entry into some pornography stuff, and the horrific tales that she told was unbelievable. And I'm listening to her, I thought, if most respectable young men heard this story
Yeah.
and understood the pain that these people were going through and what their life was really like, I think that it would totally change their perspective on this glamour industry, right?
Yeah. Right.
And that's what I hear you saying. And I think also one of my a book that I really enjoy. I can't say it's one of my favorite, but a book I really enjoy, which might be interesting for people to read, is a book called The Talent Code. And the talent code just talks about the neuroscience behind developing talents, and how we create these neurological pathways in our brain, and it goes into the science and everything behind it. It's kind of like what you're talking about. But when I understood that, that was also very beneficial for me in understanding, like, oh, like, we create habits by repetition and high emotion. And pornography pours that in, in sexual relations, pours that in both, high repetition, high emotion, and it super distorts the brain. And I
Yes.
think, that when we understand that. So anyway, I love that, because this mutuality is great. It's like it's a lose-lose situation. And healthy relationships are a win-win situation, is what I hear you
Yes.
talking about, Barb. So it's very cool. Um, we have just a few minutes left, and I could talk about forever with you on this, but um, communications.
Yep.
Can you help us just understand a couple of key communication skills that both we can have with our children, and that we can teach to our children to help them become this, again, the end goal, become this responsible, mature, contributing member of society and family and their world, right? So, what are some key communication skills?
Well, I think, as you asked that question, what came to mind is patience.
That's a biggie.
Uh, so, and again, just listening, those listening skills. I don't think we can overplay the listening,
Yeah.
asking open-ended questions. So when it comes to communicating specifically about a topic, especially a difficult topic like pornography or nudes or whatever it is, asking open-ended questions to see where they're at.
Hmm.
But part of that is just to let the kids know we're not afraid of this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So stepping into the awkward, and I used to say when I was first talking about this is to practice. And so, get in front of a mirror. If you're not used to saying pornography, masturbation, sending nudes, whatever, the
Right.
body parts, get in front of a mirror and practice. And then step into the awkward, because it's going to be strange at first. And when I first started talking about this, even with my son, just the two of us, my head was down and I was looking at my feet, and he was doing the same thing. And we'd be like him hawing and stuttering. But the more you talk about it, the easier it becomes. And so just be willing. But our kids need to know that we are a safe landing place for them,
Yeah.
and letting them know that, we're not going to Google all the questions that we have. Instead, we're going to come to mom or dad and ask those questions so that you get an appropriate answer and a clean version answer, and you don't run across those things that we purposely are trying to avoid.
Exactly. I know. I was counseling a young couple couple years ago. They'd been married, I don't know, 6, 8 months or something. And the the wife was like, well, we never talked about any of this stuff growing up.
Mm,
So I had no idea how to take care of my husband, or how to
yeah.
engage sexually with him. And like, it was just a foreign concept. So I just decided to start learning about it. And so I Googled a bunch of stuff, and she was like, she's
Oh
like,
no.
my
Yeah.
whole world was like blown apart. And luckily she had some good, healthy resources to eventually turn to, but it was like,
Yeah.
it blew her away, because you know the answer is shockingly, and I'm not shockingly, big tech companies are not running around trying to, calculate how to strengthen families and teach healthy relationships.
Yeah.
Like Google.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
like they're
It's not their
they're not
purpose.
intentionally baking it into their algorithm, right? So it's like when you look up stuff, you may not always get the best answers that
Yeah,
are helpful.
exactly.
So
You brought up a point that I should make because I haven't touched on this at all, but
please,
this is not just a guy problem. It is a girl problem too.
yes,
So, and that's how they find it. They
yeah,
have a question that they're just flat out curious. And whether you're 20 or whatever this beautiful wife was, or you're 10, you
yes,
Google and then you get this. And some people are like, no, thank you. But a lot of people, it's very intriguing. And so they're curious and they come back and,
yep,
something's triggered in their head and, the chemicals start going and
yeah,
they come back again and again. But we're doing a disservice by not remembering that it's girls and boys that get caught up in this behavior.
right, yeah, yeah. It's so very true. And I think too, we get caught up in the, going back to your comment of like, oh, is my son a monster or not? And an interesting conversation we've had many times over the years with our children is about alcohol. So my grandpa, on both sides died, both alcoholics, died of alcohol related stuff. My older brother is severe alcoholic. He's recovering and fairly sober. I say fairly, he's sober right now. And so I like, I grew up in this whole world, not only of abuse and sex abuse, but also drugs and alcohol. So we have been very open about teaching our children about, alcohol and the effects of alcoholism, and et cetera. And one day, one of our children said something to the effect of like, I'm never going to drink alcohol because it tastes terrible and it's awful. And, went on. And I said, hold on, I got bad news for you. Now, I've never tasted alcohol myself. I said, but apparently it's really good, right? Like
Otherwise, all these people wouldn't be drinking it.
Right.
your body is designed to respond to this.
Yeah.
And I said, and it's the same thing with like sex, like, you're actually designed to have these feelings and these hormones and these desires. Like it's supposed to be that way for lots of different reasons. But, so we can't vilify that. We just have to
Right.
learn this proper sphere that it comes into.
Yes.
And the problem is that, we look things up and we have these feelings, and then if we're not having clear communication with the children, they're not sure, is this a good feeling or a bad feeling? Should I pursue this? Should I not? Should I sneak it? Am I now a monster? Am I like getting away with something? Am I having fun? Like all this stuff. And plus, they're going, especially if it's early in their teen years, they're going from, what an estimated like 8 or 10 emotions that they feel to something like 40 or 50. And it's like, we're just compounding all that stuff all at the same time. It's like, so open communication with them, like what you're saying, is crazy important. So that it's like, no, you're not a freak of nature. You're not terrible for having those feelings. You looked at that girl; she was pretty. I'll bet that was exciting. Like it's supposed to be. Or you looked at that.
Yes.
But
Yes.
here's what you do with that, right?
Yeah.
Here's how
Yeah.
you build it.
Manage it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, oh man, Barb, this is awesome. We probably ought to have a follow-up visit with you at some point, and because we're out of time today, but I wonder if there's anything that you hoped we had asked you that you're like, oh man, this is my gem. I really hope they asked me about this, and then I blew it and didn't ask. Like, is there something that I should have asked or that we could have talked about that you really wanted to talk about that you want to leave us with?
Well, I should round out my story because I always forget this part. My son is walking in freedom from his problem.
Oh,
He's my hero. I love
oh,
him. We have an amazing relationship, and I always get choked up when I think about it because part of it is that it was through all this that we got closer and closer together. I mean, at first there was a breach and then we had to come back together. And, reconciliation and restoration is so important, learning how to forgive, et cetera.
yeah,
But one advice I give, or I guess a nugget of truth, if you will, to parents is to just say, this does not define you. And
yeah,
it doesn't define your child because our story isn't over yet.
yeah,
And so if we're in the thick of it, we're in the problem stage, like in those years that we talked about at the beginning, It's there's hope. There's some hope, and there can be redemption and some forgiveness and reconciliation at the end.
Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful place to
Glad you
wrap up.
told us.
Thank you.
Yes, that's so
And it's so
great.
true. There is having an assumption that our children won't change it defies the mission of Christ and defies human nature. They can change and they can become. You're so very right. And there is redemption possible. So beautiful. Thank you. Now, uh, so I number one, I think that we ought to have a follow-up interview, but that's beside the point. But I'm willing to bet that there's a lot of additional questions or people listening want to go deeper into your world
Sure.
and understand these things a little bit better. So what's the best path to go to get into
Sure.
Barb Winters' universe and understand all this stuff?
The best path is to start at my website, which is hopefulmom.net. And on the website, they will find blog posts. They will find links to various podcasts that I've been on, like this one. They will find resources that I recommend. And of course, they'll find a link to the information about my book. And they'll find links to social media that I'm on, Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram places. Yeah.
That's great.
That's awesome. And is your book, I'm assuming your book's just available on Amazon as well?
Yes, absolutely. Can find it on Amazon. And it just came out on Audible. So very exciting.
There you go.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, did you narrate it?
I did not, but I'm listening to it right now. And the narrator did such an excellent job. I'm so impressed.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
So exciting.
I narrated a book and then wish I hadn't. But anyway, that's I book that I don't know. Okay, well, wonderful. So hopefulmoms.net.
Hopeful Mom.
Hopeful Mom.
Wonderful.
Singular. Hopefulmom.net.
Mhm.
And then your book, Expectations. So that's awesome. Well, we're going to shout it out to the world, send people there. I really want to encourage you guys. I don't think that this is a thing of, hey, if maybe you're having struggles with some of this stuff in your family, I just don't think that's a conversation anymore. I think that every child now in our world today is going to have questions about healthy sexual relationships, about gender issues, about pornography, about all that kind of stuff. They're going to have peer pressure coming at them for various degrees. So it's not a question of, well, maybe we should just hold off, and if something happens in our family, we can talk about this. I just don't think that's a correct approach.
Correct.
I think that it's like we as parents have got to be proactive.
Communicate and have that relationship so that they do feel comfortable talking
exactly.
to us.
Yeah. So it doesn't just start. I mean, like you so clearly said, it doesn't just start with the talk. It has to do with the relationship that we have with them, and like you said, the communication, the safe space, and helping them understand selflessness and all the things. So anyway, well, Barb, thank you so much. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Have a frank conversation and for all that you're doing in the world. We really appreciate it. So we wish you the best of luck. We're praying for you and for your success, and all those families out there for theirs as well. So anyway, thanks again. We appreciate it. All right.
Take care.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye.